Not only am I happy to announce that I am now using paints in my artwork, but I'm also thoroughly enjoying it. So right here, this is one of the experiments that I did recently, and I didn't record this because I was honestly just playing around, just trying to see what I could find, and I'm just so happy with the results. The colors just came out so nice. And you may or may not be surprised to see that this isn't watercolor. These are paints. Mostly what I see people using when they make this kind of thing is watercolor. So I I just kind of thought that I could be a little subversive and use paints instead. So here, this is my attempt, and I'm going to show you a smaller example. So I'm going to show you the entire process of kind of what I did here. Of course, I was just playing around, and so I hope that if you want to sit down and get your art supplies out, you can paint along with me. This is very relaxing, especially this part right here where I'm going to use these paints. And what I want to show you is this is the Creatology paints. They are pretty much paints for children. And what was amazing is that I happened to be at the craft store. I live in the US, so our craft stores tend to be like a Michael's or a Joann's. So I went to Michael's and they just had them there. They had these paints there for $3, the entire set, and they were pastel colors. So you're going to see them here. A few of the colors were a little too vibrant for my taste, but I have an easy way to fix that, which is just by adding either white paint or something else like that. So the colors are very pretty, and I was just so happy to be able to finally use them today because I bought them about a month ago, I think, and I've just been afraid to use them, so I'm just going at it today. We're just going to do this. And in the first drawing that I showed you just a couple minutes ago, that one I basically used every single color. I didn't choose. I put a little bit of every color on my palette and I just went for it just to see what it would look like. But for this one that I'm going to start right now, I'm choosing just cool colors. I want to see how just the blues and maybe a little bit of purple interact. So I think I'm going to use this purple. There was also a softer lavender in the set, and I just didn't feel like using the lavender this time. And the good thing here is that just a tiny bit of paint goes a long way. I did notice something about these paints is that they aren't very, what would the word be for it? They're not very thick, like very viscous. I've noticed that when companies make paints for children, they're much more liquid. In other words, they're runnier. And I actually like that. I like that a lot. There was a set that I bought a few years ago that I still have some of. I should probably get that out sometime soon. So, note to self, get the old paints out too. I noticed that kids' paints like tempera paints and the like, or other types of acrylic paints for children, they're very liquid and they're almost see-through. They're not terribly opaque. And I know that that might annoy some people. And just so you know, right here, all I'm doing is adding some gesso. And the reason I'm using the gesso is actually the exact same reason I'm using these paints, is that they're all kind of see-through. They're not super opaque, and I like that. I like that when they layer on top of each other, these paints just kind of are like little sheets of see-through paper that are right on top of each other. And I really like that. I don't want the paints to be too intense. So let's see how these look together. At first, I think because when they're wet, they're going to look a lot more vibrant or a lot darker than they will when we're done. So I'm going to forewarn you that this is the ugly stage of the painting, and it's in fact the most fun stage of the painting. So let's see here. I'm just going to get started with... I'm going to get some water because I know I'm going to need that. And if any of you are wondering, this paper is a half sheet of paper. So I have some mixed media paper that measures 9 by 12, and I just cut that in half for this. So I think I just want to start with some of this orange, just a tiny bit, because this is the color I'm going to use the least of. And I'm just going to spread it around. Notice how thin it is. I love that. It feels very much like watercolor would be. And I am going to do this as quickly as possible, almost in order to prevent the paint from drying out entirely as I add more. So I'm starting to add some of the blue. I don't even know what I'm doing at this point. I'm kind of just working very gesturally. I'm working very loosely, and I'm not even going to worry about where things end up. You'll notice a lot of the colors are mixing, and I like that. I like that a lot. So let's see. How about some of this lighter blue over here? And I know one of the worries might be that some of these colors will turn to brown, but I'm actually pleased that they're not. They're not really turning to brown, although I don't mind the brown. I might do some tests later to see if I can mix some of these. Because they are pastels, I'm not sure how well they'll turn into browns, but I do enjoy some brown tones. So I'm starting to add some of that purple and blue together just to see how they mix. I feel like I'm going to end up with that space down there where I'm holding it. I know some of you might be cringing right now, wondering why I didn't tape this down, and I'm very much a rebel when it comes to painting. So I'm not going to tape it down. I'm not going to follow any of the rules right now. So I'm just kind of making a mess everywhere, and I'm enjoying it. This is actually a lot of fun. I used to paint a lot. Would it be almost 15, 20 years ago? I used to paint. I think because back then I had taken a few art classes when I was first going to college. And I just remember thinking to myself that if I wanted to be an artist, I had to learn to paint. And so I learned a little bit of painting, and it was fun, but I think I just kind of fell out of it. The supplies were just too expensive for me. I was definitely broke. And so here I'm just playing around with the brush, just kind of tapping it just to see if I can get any of the colors to mix together. I'm going to try to add a little bit more of this orange. It starts to look a little bit red compared to the others, but I like that. That's pretty cool. Definitely very messy. This is exactly what I want. I want everything to kind of mix together. It's all still very wet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that gesso and just tap it around. You could also use white paint, I suppose, but I couldn't find the white paint right now, so I just went for the gesso, because it also does the same thing. In my experience, it tends to kind of soften the colors even further, so I'm just tapping it on there while everything is still wet. And so they're kind of going to mix a little. And so, let's see, how about I add a little bit more here? It won't look this white once it dries. I know that from using this gesso in the past. It tends to just kind of fade in, and I like that. I don't want anything being too stark or anything jumping out too much right now, because this is the background of my drawing. I'm not going to use any black. I'm going to try not to use any colors that are too vibrant. So I want to try to mute them a little. But right now I'm just going to add a little more purple because I'm obsessed with this color. I have always been a purple queen, so I'm going to add just a little more to a few spots. So I think I'm okay with those little purple spots. Maybe I can fill that bottom area in a little more. Pretend like my fingers weren't holding it there the whole time. So I think this is pretty good for me. I may trim the paper, I may not. I'm not sure yet. I'll think about it. But I think what I'm going to do for a few minutes is I'm going to take the heat gun to this. So here it is, it's ready to go. I'm actually pretty surprised that the colors are still pretty vibrant. So I'm hoping that that won't interfere with the doodling that I'm going to be doing on top of this. So let's see how this works out. What I'm going to be using is a Posca marker. I've only used this a couple of times. This is a new one. This is actually my first time getting Posca markers, so they're doing pretty good. I really like them. I actually like these the most right here. These are the brush tipped Posca markers. And this was a set that I got. One of them is black, one of them is white, and they have this little button that you push to let the ink out. So let me show you the tip. So this is the white one. It's definitely the one I like the most. I'm constantly looking for ways to add highlights to my drawings, and this has been pretty good so far in the different drawings that I've tested it out on. So I'll be using this one later. And I might be using this one as well. So it's a brush tipped black marker, but I'm going to use this one for now just because I think it's going to give me more freedom with the way that I doodle. So I'm going to start by making some swirls, and I think that might be the design I use for the whole drawing, but I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to start with a spiral. And let me see here. I think I'm just going to continue following that spiral. So I think I'm just going to add more lines that follow that same design. So I'm just going to work my way around. I admit I'm still not entirely comfortable with the way these markers feel. I feel like I have to hold them at a certain angle so that the ink comes out nicely. Like in a sense, if I push the marker against the grain of the tip, it'll kind of bounce and some of the ink will kind of jump out. So I have to be careful to hold it in a certain angle. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, if you use Posca markers. If anyone has advice on using them, please, I would love to hear your advice. I'm still trying to get used to the feel of them. And of course, it's a huge difference from just regular pens. It's definitely something to get used to. Although so far, I'm really enjoying them. It's pretty good. They do the job. And it makes it so that I don't have to use a teeny tiny brush with black paint in order to get these lines in here. So I'm just continuing adding some of these swirls, and I'm being kind of messy. I know I could be a little more delicate and kind of try to make them look nicer, but I just want to play around. And so I just closed off the swirl there in the center. Just added a little bit more of that paint there. It almost looks like a wave, like I'm drawing waves in the ocean. So I think I'm really enjoying this pattern. I'm going to try adding another one here. So this line, I'm going to let it continue out, and then I'm going to use it to start another one of these swirls. So like this. See what I can do with that one. I'm going to come over here and add another one around it. And then I think I'm just going to do the same thing that I did with the first one. And hopefully I'm going to try not to get paint all over my hands, because I'm so used to just working with pens that I'm pretty sure at some point I'm going to end up smearing paint all over myself, and I'm fine with that. I don't mind. So let's add another one, maybe just to right here. And maybe one just right here. And in the center I'm just kind of making a circle with a couple of different little circles inside of it, and then maybe just clean up this edge here. Okay, that's fine. And then I think I'm just going to add a few more of these curves around the outside of it, just to kind of accent the way that this whole shape is just kind of swirling in around itself. And maybe another one right here. So again, sorry if my hand is in the way briefly. It's just I have to hold the marker a certain way so that it doesn't skip or bounce. I really am trying to keep my hand out of the way. It's just I'm sure that it's kind of unavoidable. So let's see, this one, I'm just going to add a few more lines to it just to kind of continue along. I think it looks good so far. I'm actually kind of happy with this, so let's keep going. I will admit this is one of those supplies that it almost feels like moving up in the world. I hope that I'm not annoying anyone with my commentary about when the supplies are expensive or when they're cheap. It's just I'm going to be quite honest, and I have been blessed recently with a very stable home environment. And what that's allowing me to do is to have a place to work. So at home, I have now my own room to create in. So essentially, I have a studio. And I have my own art supplies that I've been able to buy with my own money. And that's amazing. I don't know if any of you come from a similar background as me, but I'm an immigrant. I come from an immigrant family. And thankfully, I came here to the US very young, and so I learned the language and the lifestyle very quickly, but that doesn't mean that things were easy. I grew up in a very, very, very poor family, and being at a stage now where I can actually afford my own things and feel safe is huge. It's very huge. So if I ever mention that I think these supplies are expensive and I don't want to buy them, just know that that's where I'm coming from. That, let's say these Posca pens, I'm really enjoying them, but I still kind of carry a little bit of guilt inside because of how much they cost. I'm trying to remember how much they cost. I got them on Amazon. So it was a pack for these. I think it was a pack of 2 or a pack of 3. And I don't think it even cost $10, and I felt like that was a lot. So I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty. These art supplies are amazing, and get them if you're ready. I was ready. And so I guess if there's anything I'm saying right now, it's that I feel absolutely blessed right now to be able to get a few things and not feel like it's the end of the world. So that's what this, if anything, that's what this painting is. It's a celebration of just being able to actually enjoy being creative, enjoy having a space of my own, and having a safe place to just be myself, to be an artist, to get some painting done, to get some doodles done. So if you're trying to follow along or do some kind of doodles like these, notice that I'm just randomly finding a spot in the previous swirl and then just kind of coming out from there and starting another swirl. I'm really not, there's no method here. I suppose there could be a method to it if you wanted to analyze it a little further, but I'm just kind of going with whatever feels right now. I don't want to give any like specific instruction on how this is done. I'm just going to let you observe and kind of just let you figure out which parts of this you're enjoying and maybe which parts of it you want to replicate or kind of try out in your own doodles. I think that's part of what's important as artists, is to kind of figure out your own thing, your own preferred methods. So I'm just going to keep adding more. I think that for me, one of those things that maybe defines my little doodles or my artwork is probably just the use of repetition. So once I find one element, because I'm not even talking about the swirl itself here, I'm talking about an element as far as like a strategy, and my strategy is repetition. And so I find, let's say, this curved line, and then I make it over and over and over, and then I just repeat until I can't repeat any longer, just to see how far it goes. And that's something that I like to do a lot in a lot of my drawings. So in this one, I think I have this space here. I'm going to make it darker, so I'm just going to add more of that paint. And I have some space up on the top right. I'm going to try to start another swirl there. Let's see how it goes. So right there, it's a little smaller than the others, but I think it should work out just fine. I guess that's what's nice about these shapes. Because they're so fluid, you can kind of make it work however you want to make it work. It should always fit, whether they're small or large. So I think that looks pretty good right there. I'm just going to fill it in with a few more of these curves. I'm actually really happy with how quickly this is coming together. I was afraid that I was going to be sitting here for hours because I was painting, and I'm pleasantly surprised that it's not taking forever. And I'm slowly starting to get accustomed to the marker as well. So I'm hoping that over the next few months, as I keep playing around with it, I will get a little more confident with it. And I'll figure out ways to not make a mess with the marker. Because I know that the first few times that I tried it, I ended up, I guess, pressing on it the wrong way, and the ink kind of splattered outwards. And it left a really interesting pattern on my little painting. Not necessarily one I wanted, but it was nice to know that it could do that if I used it that way. And so I'm thinking at this point that I'm just about done with all of these lines. And so I'm just going to start filling in some of these areas with black. Because I think for this one, because there is so much color going on, I'm going to try to find ways to tone back all of those colors. So I think that my first step in toning all that back is in filling a couple of these regions at the end just with black. And so I guess right now I'm going to see how well it covers. I'm assuming it's going to cover pretty well, but let's just keep going. I think it's doing pretty well. I think just because of the angle that I'm looking at it from, I know that the camera's directly above, but my eyes are at like a 30-degree angle to the surface of the table, so I'm seeing a lot of shine. I'm hoping that I'm not missing any spots. I probably am, but mostly it just looks really shiny from where I'm at. I'm pretty sure that this would be resolved if I were working up on an easel, but this is paper and I'm lazy, so I'm pretty much just gonna keep working on the table until I find a reason to work in a different direction. For some reason, I just didn't like working up on an easel, like on a vertical surface. It kind of felt like I was painting on a wall or something. I don't know. It may just been my weird mind at the time. I really do prefer drawing on a table or a desk or something like that. I think I'm doing pretty good here. I'm just finishing up this last little corner. And it really does look like I missed a couple of spots, but I'm kind of just going to leave it for now. I don't want to focus on any of those little details right now. I'm just playing around. But definitely I am going to fill this area up here with black. More than just making the area black, what it's also doing is adding weight to that side of the drawing. There's a whole lot of movement going on in the rest of it, and I really need something to anchor it down. And I think that's what this large black area is going to do. I'm not sure that I'm going to leave it just black, but I do need it to act like as a nice big heavy anchor so that it doesn't feel like everything is just kind of flying all over the place. So I think that looks good. I'm going to think a little longer about whether I want to make any more regions just filled with black. So let's see, what do I want to move to next? I have one of these smaller Posca markers. I got a little set of them and I was trying it out and I want to show you what it's doing. So I'm supposed to press down on the tip after I shake it. And it's actually making really thick lines. And I think that's because the tip of it degraded so quickly. So let me see what it looks like if I use it in one of these spots here. Yeah, that's really big. It's pretty much almost as big as the medium marker. So I'm going to set that aside. I wasn't really happy with the smaller markers. So I'm actually going to show you something interesting is I'm going to use my pen. In the last drawing, I was very pleased to discover that my pen could still draw over this base of acrylic paints, and it has a different quality to it. Of course, it doesn't look the same as the paint, but as far as I'm concerned, this is perfect. So for this little section, I'm going to be just using my regular pen. So some of you who have been following my journey for the last couple of weeks or months, you may have noticed that I like to use these pens a lot. So here they are making a comeback. Even in my paintings, apparently, these pens are doing great. So I'm just having a lot of fun just kind of scribbling in these little lines. You'll notice that I'm pretty much sticking to the, what would I call them, like the little corners. These little thin spots that are created at the end of each segment. And I'm just adding basically just a shadow there. And I'm achieving this just by putting in a couple of lines that just radiate out from, so like right here and here. And right here I'm going to put maybe 2 of them like that. It just makes it a little darker. So essentially it creates a shadow there. And I'm just going to go around, let me feel, no, so it looks fine. And the ink looks like it's drying up pretty quickly on top of this acrylic paint. And so that actually made me really happy. And I'm glad to be able to show you guys these pens, although they're inexpensive. They have actually surprised me quite a bit. In a previous drawing, I used them, what did I use on top of them? I used something very wet. I think I used an ink wash over them. So what an ink wash is just a mix of a little bit of ink with a lot of water in order to create like a soft gray on your drawing. And I used an ink wash over this, like the doodles that I had made with this pen, and the pen handled it just fine. It didn't bleed at all. So essentially this pen is waterproof, and apparently I can also use it on top of acrylics, which I'm very pleased about. So here it is, putting in some work. My rusty trusty little rollerball pens. And you'll notice that as I add those lines to those areas, I'm adding so much depth. Already it's making such a huge difference, so I'm just going to keep going around and keep adding those. I am being a little bit messy, so if any of you are perfectionists, which I'll be honest, I am too. I tend to focus way too much on making everything look exactly the way that I want it, but in this one, I'm trying to let go of that. So some of my lines are going to be a little messy, some of my scribbles are going to get a little ugly, and I'm just going to let it be. So essentially I'm trying to practice what I preach. I'm trying really hard to just accept the way that things are coming out. I'm actually surprised I haven't made any huge mistakes yet. I probably will at some point. And just so you know, by the way, when I say mistakes, I don't mean like bad mistakes. I mean in the sense of just something that was unintended. At some point, something unintended will happen. And sometimes those things are wonderful, and sometimes they're a little annoying. And we just deal with it. I think one of those mistakes was using this pen, but it was a wonderful mistake. And it's really helping me add a lot of nice shading to this. I guess it's a painting, it's a drawing, it's an experiment. I may accidentally call it a drawing at some point, but I guess technically it's a painting now. So I'm just going to continue adding these nice little lines throughout here. Just seeing how far I can go with those. It is a little hard drawing in between these marker lines, but I'm just going to kind of throw them in here. I'm just keeping in mind that I'm only putting them there just so that it creates like a little bit of a darker tone. Mostly I just don't want to go and try to find another paint. I don't want to try to squeeze in more lines using the big marker anymore. I don't want to try to complicate things for myself. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is I'm just trying to find the easiest route, the easiest solution. And for now, I guess that means using my normal pens. And I'm actually more than halfway done. I'll be done pretty soon here, since these are kind of occurring really quickly. And I'm thinking of this stage too as another kind of gestural practice, is I just find a spot and I just put a line in it really quickly. So I think I'm just going to come back here real quick and add a few more. See if I can squeeze them in here. And it looks like I'm just going to add a few more in here. One of the things I'm actually thinking right now is that I'm actually really pleased that I don't really feel the texture of the paint underneath. And let me see if I can figure out. I think the reason I don't feel the texture of the paint underneath is because I actually laid it down so thinly. And I wonder if it's also probably because of the thickness of the paint. Since I did mention that the paint that I used, it is marketed as kids paint. And it tends to be a little more gel-like or more watery or something like that. It's not quite as thick. So at least it's able to be laid down really thinly. So I wonder if that's why I don't feel the texture of the paint underneath, which is nice. I actually really like that. Because in the past I have used paints that were thicker. And they tend to leave a lot of nice texture. Which is great if you're only working in the paint. Like if you want to leave nice big fat globs or you want all your brush strokes to show, that's excellent. But I think in this case I probably really didn't want much texture happening. And so I think it worked out really nicely. So I was really happy with that. And I'm going to try using this white Posca marker. I'm almost a little bit afraid to use it just because I know it's just sheer white paint in here. One thing that I am enjoying though is that the paint isn't exactly opaque. It is just a little see-through at times. It depends on how much of that pigment is kind of coming out. So I'm going to add some white here, and this is not only going to help tone down kind of the brightness or just had the intensity of those colors. It's of course adding those little highlights, those shiny spots. And I feel like the paint is coming out a little bit see-through, so we'll see how it looks once it dries. It looks like I've got a big bubble on here too. Hopefully that doesn't make a mess. So I'm just gonna head my way towards the center of this swirl here. I can't really see it too much, but I want to see how it looks after it dries out, because I do know that some paints change as they dry. So I'm also wondering if I need to get some more of that paint to come out of the brush. We'll see in a sec. Oh, well, so much for that. So it looks like I have an impromptu little splotch on my paper. How about I just go with it? Let's just use that. Let's pick some of that up. I guess this is what I meant by some of those mistakes. I'm gonna see if I can use that paint up, because it's quite a nice big fat drop. I guess that'll be a note to self, is to not push the button when I'm directly over the painting. Let's see if I can keep using some of that. That might help. But I am noticing that it's much more opaque now, so I guess that's what I wanted to. I'll make sure to push the button maybe a couple more times before I start painting with it. So let's see. Let me work on some of these spots over here. I'm going to leave that splotch of paint alone for a while now. I might just kind of scrape it up. Let me see if I can pick some of that up. It's not too bad. I'm okay with that. I'm thinking what I can just do in a little bit is just come in with some of the paint and just kind of go over it. Should be fine. That's probably, in my mind, what's so forgiving about painting is that if you don't like the way something came out, you can just paint right over it. So I think that's what I'm going to do as soon as that area dries up. I'm really liking the white though. Let me see if I can go over these areas that I did at the beginning. See if I can bring that white out a little more. I think it's working. So I think maybe the next time I use this brush marker, I'll try to prime it a little better so I can get that white to really come out. Although I must say though, sometimes I do like it when it comes out a little a little clear. I do like that too. So I'm just going to add a few more over here on this side. And I think I'm just going to add more up here. I'm not even really thinking anymore about logically where there's any light shining. I'm kind of just going to add it in places just to see how it looks. So there, and maybe some over here on this side. I'm going to let it kind of continue on, kind of following that curve there. I think I like that. I like that a bit. I think I want to add more up here. Let's see how that looks. Again, I don't think I'm even adding it very logically, but it's an experiment, so even if it doesn't make logical sense, it should at least still look pleasing. And it came out a little bit clear, but I think that was probably a good thing. So I think I'm really liking it. I'm gonna come in here and I'm thinking of adding just a little bit more. Let's see. So I've got this spot here first that I need to fix. So I'm going to try to just add a little bit of the purple, see what happens here. And maybe some blue and just spread it out. And it looks like it's matching pretty nicely. So like I said before, just adding some paint again, probably fix it. So while that dries, I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to add some dots. Some little dots and circles to the edge where I had a lot of that black going on. And I'm going to try to make it look as random as possible. I realize that that's actually kind of a hard task. A lot of us, when we start making simple shapes like this, like dots and circles, we tend to form patterns. And so we'll end up with these areas that just look perfectly, I guess, separated or perfectly set up. Start to create a nice little grid pattern. And so I'm trying my hardest to kind of set them up where sometimes they're closer together and sometimes farther apart, just to make it look as random as possible. And I think that's probably good enough. I'm not sure if I'll add anything else. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. And so I'm just going to go around the edge and kind of create this black border. I don't think I really need the black border. It's just something that I tend to do because I think it almost frames it in when I see that edge, even if it's just a thin one like this. So you notice it's just a very thin line that I'm going around the edge. It feels to me like it's just a framing device, and I like that. It makes it look to me like it's a little window. And I'm going to try to do my best to not get my hands covered in ink right now, so let me see. Sometimes I forget that when I work quickly like this and I'm working with paint instead of ink, it can take just a little longer for that to dry, so just trying to do my best to not get it all over the place. So there, that pretty much adds like this little frame around the edges. Is there anything else I want to do? Again, I'm trying not to think too much about it. It's just I feel that if I come in later and I'm not happy with the results, I'll probably sit down and spend another hour with it. And I think I'd rather just do what I can now so that I don't feel tempted to come back to it and kind of keep editing it. But I think right now that this is as good as it's going to get. And I really like the results. I like the dots. I like that it actually does have some depth to it. So I'm really pleased with that. It was a little bit of a challenge working with the Posca markers, so I'm actually still on the fence about whether I'm going to continue getting them. So I'm even going to do my signature here using one of the little itty bitty brushes. So this is something that I am considering. I'm thinking of really just learning to use the brushes. A couple of years ago, I got these little brushes, and even though they were tiny, they still weren't as tiny as I needed. So I ended up trimming some of the some of the bristles off of it just to get it super tiny so I could do this kind of thing. And so there's a chance I may just not get the Posca markers anymore. So I think this is all set, and I'm happy with the result. I'm definitely going to be trying this again sometime soon. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope that you have a great day.